Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. We'd like to present to you three articles of interest. And before I do that, I would like to let you know this is for review, informational, and educational purposes. It's not to take the credit for the intellectual property of the article. The full credit to the intellectual property of the article goes to the publisher, which is Digital Trends, and the story by Monica J. White. Right? Now, the headline reads the next SSDs may be 80% faster, which is quite a bit. Micron just announced an important milestone. It's working on the first PCIe 6.0 SSD and ensure like it's going to offer blisteringly fast speeds. Micron promises to deliver sequential read bandwidths of over 26 gigabytes, not bits, because it's capital B bytes, so that's gigabytes, 26 gigabytes per second. Quite a feat considering that the fastest SSD right now has a maximum of 14.5 gigabytes per second. It'll be a long time before any of us can own a 26 gigabytes per second SSD, although because Micron's new products is being made for data centers, it's no wonder the ever-pressing demand for AI and various high-performance computing or HPC workloads make it so that these big developments are bound to end up in enterprise situations at first. However, the fact that the first PCIe 6.0 SSD is under development and that's so incredibly fast is good news for you and me too. Right now, PCIe 5.0 SSDs are readily available in stores, and we've seen a gradual rise in the speeds of the technology and starting to mature. One of the fastest SSDs, if not the fastest currently available to people like you and me, is the crucial T705, which hits read speeds of 14.5 gigabytes per second. And that's 80% uplift between the SSD and what Micron is working on now. And Micron promises to reach over 26 gigabytes per second, unquote. So the gap could grow wider. Thinking back to PCIe Gen 3 certainly puts the 26 gigabyte per second number into perspective. PCIe 3.0 SSDs typically only went as high as 3.5 gigabytes per second. And ahead of you see a picture of Micron in the GDR7. And Micron is a very famous company for making chips, especially memory. Now they're working on SSDs. So just in case you're not familiar with the acronym, SSD stands for solid state drive. It is a hard drive that does not have moving parts. Now there has been different versions of the SSD. The newest device after SSD was something called NVMe, which is something that looks like a memory stick, which actually stores. It's a permanent, what they call permanent storage, meaning when you turn off the computer, the information doesn't get deleted or lost. So anyway, that's Micron copyright provided by Digital Trends. Microsoft isn't just ushering in new SSDs, though, because its upcoming GDDR7 memory is also on the horizon. That is, will find its way to consumers a lot quicker. Rumor has it that the NVIDIA's next GX 50 series will use GDDR7 memory, and Microsoft touts an up to 30% improvement in games between GDDR6 and GDDR7. The GDDR has to do with it's the graphical double density RAM, and this is version 7. This has to do with graphical RAM. Okay, so that is RAM for a graphics card. So moving on, and the article concludes with saying Micron's upcoming SSD is an enigma right now. Outside of the promise regarding sequential read bandwidths, Micron is saving the juicy scoop for upcoming keynote during the Flash Memory Summit, FMS 2024. It is unclear how much would be revealed or when SSD will even land on the hands of Micron's, and he puts in parentheses, very much enterprise only clients. It'll be a long time before you can buy an SSD of that caliber and install on your PC, but one day, a few years from now, it'll happen, and that's pretty mind-blowing. Well, considering that that's the normal progress of technology, according to so it's the memory equivalent of what's called Moore's law, which is the exponential um, progress or speed increase of processors, which they've already hit a wall on that. So I believe that's why that they were looking for a better solution, which is why they came up, why they're working on quantum computing. Okay, so that's from the latest tech news delivered to your inbox, as the publisher says. And by the way, what you see here is actual, that is laptop RAM. Okay, it's called SODIMM memory. It's memory for SODIMM slot on a laptop. Okay. Desktops are longer, bigger RAM, are cheaper per gigabyte, but so is also the production of a desktop versus a laptop. Now let's get to our second article here. And before I do that, we'd like to let you know this is for review, information, and educational purposes. It's not to take the credit for the intellectual property of the article. The full credit of the intellectual property of the article goes to the publisher, which in this case is Live Science, and the story by Owen Hughes. Headline reads, Crazy Idea. Memory device could slash AI energy consumption by up to 2,500 times. And ahead of us is the actual hardware device that these are called pins, and it goes to what's called a register on board. Caption reads, Crazy Idea memory device could slash AI energy consumption by up to, this means the maximum, 2,500 times. Copyright Serhiy Prestufa, Getty Images. And let's get that to 100, so actually it's too small. There we go. Researchers developed a new type of memory device that they say could reduce the energy consumption of artificial intelligence or AI by at least 1,000. Keywords are at least. Now, called Computational Random Access Memory, or CRAM, the new device performs computations directly within its memory cells, eliminating the need to transfer data across different parts of the computer. So normally what would happen is, if there needs to be a calculation, whatever's stored in RAM sends it through the bus, and the bus sends it to the processor in what's called the interrupt. So the lower the interrupt, the higher the priority. What happens is, based upon the priority, or priority interrupts, basically lower the number. So 0 basically is the processor. For each device, they have their own priority. Okay, and so what happens is, according to priority, there'll be requests from whatever device to do a calculation. So the idea is, if you don't have to send it through the bus and wait your turn to the processor and go all the way back through the bus and all the way back to the device, it'll speed things up, which makes sense. The only question is, how well will it do it? Well, anyway, in traditional computing, data constantly moves from processor where the data is processed to memory where the data is stored. This is, by the way, what they call volatile memory. This means it's temporary storage. That is, when the computer shut off, the memory is erased, or the data is erased itself. That's volatile, or otherwise known as temporary storage. In most computers, there is a RAM module. This process is particularly energy intensive in AI applications, which typically involve complex computations and massive amounts of data. And ahead of you see a related video says, new AI finds hidden patterns in numbers. You kind of had to expect that because what's happening is the program itself is running in a more efficient and faster way because we're using electrons. So you're going basically at the speed of light, technically. Um, for part of it, the other part of it, there is a bottleneck because the other part of it does not, by definition, does not go as fast as the speed of light, which electrons do. But the idea is it can process information much faster. It's not creative, cannot come up, it doesn't have any original thought, but can process information faster. And based upon the information it keeps processing, in theory, it learns, and then it can go exponentially faster. So that's the idea. Now, according to figures from the International Energy Agency, global energy consumption for AI could double from 460 terawatt hours, or TWH, in 2022 to 1,000 terawatt hours in 2026, equivalent to Japan's total electricity consumption. As per a reviewed study published in July 25 in the journal NPJ Unconventional Computing, researchers demonstrated that CRAM could perform key AI tasks like scalar addition and matrix multiplication in 434 nanoseconds. Okay. Not milliseconds, not megaseconds. Nano. That's a billion. So it's a billionth of a second. 434 divided by a billion is what would happen. So it's 434 of the billionth of a second, using just 0.4 or 0.47 microjoules of energy. So joules is electronic measurement of energy. It's just in physics is a general measurement of energy. So electronics uses, so everything uses physics, okay? So we have a standard for measurements and names for physics, and all the other ones will use that. So joules is just a standard measurement of energy. So yes, it's 0.47 microjoules. That's 1 millionth of a joule of energy. So that's how much energy it takes. This is some 2,500 times less energy compared to the conventional memory systems that have separate logic and memory components, the researchers said. The researcher, which has been 20 years in the making, received financial backing from the U.S. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA. If you're not familiar with DARPA, they're the ones who's made all these robots for supposedly for research purposes, as in for theoretical science. But for many news stories that have come out publicly is that the U.S. military and other agencies are using these robots developed by DARPA. So, yeah. Anyway, as well as the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the National Science Foundation, and the tech company of Cisco. So Cisco. And if you're not familiar with Cisco, Cisco is the company that makes network equipment, as in your routers, your switches, if they still make repeaters, cabling. So mainly the devices like routers and switches, those repeaters, I believe, is a thing of the past. It's basically what it is. What a repeater is basically it will repeat just what the title implies or says, is that it repeats a signal. So what happens is you take a cable, a networking cable, not a power cable, a networking cable, usually copper based. At least it was in the past copper based. And what happens is it will take from the end of that cable, right? Let's say from one end to the other. So let's say beginning to end. So let's say, okay. So the end of the cable where it plugs into the device, right? If you want to have a longer use of a cable, you wouldn't be able to, because past a certain cable length, the signal traveled inside of the cable dissipates over distance. Just like you can't throw a ball in infinite length, there is a limit to it. So what happens is when the cable goes into, what happens is the cable, you'll have a cable, it'll be plugged into a repeater. Repeater will copy the signal, and then from another cable, or possibly even the same cable, depending on how the repeater does it, it will take that signal, send it through another cable to the next networking device. And so that was what it was. They don't do that anymore because the standards of the, say, for, for example, wireless routers now. So before those wireless routers, basically you had to rely on the length of the cable to go from, for example, a device such as your computer to the hub or to the switch or to the router. So hub is just basically it's like what they call a dumb terminal. It doesn't route anything, it's just there as a central point. Your router basically takes in all the traffic, both wired and wireless, and has a intelligent way of knowing where to send it through the network, okay, in the internal network. And of course, switch is something where you have all the connections connected to it, and then it just sends it. It just does what's called the universal broadcast, which just sends it off, or otherwise known as a public broadcast, which sends it off to all the devices simultaneously. So you can see one is sends it off the same signal off to everybody or in different places, so it's routed. For greater connections, what you do is you'll go through a switch, because a switch basically will have the ability to send it all off all at the same time. Okay. In a smaller network, we'll go with a router, because a router will be able to decide where the traffic should be routed or sent to. Okay. So yeah, and then of course people don't use hubs so much. I mean, it's possible for shorter distances and such, but that's a thing. That's like a '90s thing, is hubs, right? Yeah. So a very short distance, you can use hubs, and everybody's connected to the hub, which is connected to a switch or a router. Ultimately, where you have all the connections coming in for a certain area, that's going to be a switch. But anyway, that's beyond the scope of this article here. Back to the article. Jinping Wang, a senior author of the paper and professor of the University of Minnesota's Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering, said the researchers' proposal to use memory cells for computing was initially deemed crazy. Yes, in quotes, crazy. Quote, with an evolving group of students since 2003 and a true interdisciplinary faculty team built at the University of Minnesota from physics, materials science, and engineering, computer science and engineering, or, excuse me, to modeling and benchmarking and hardware creation, meaning we now have demonstrated this type of this kind of technology is feasible and is ready to be incorporated into technology. Excuse me, unquote. Wong said in a statement. The most efficient RAM devices typically use 4 to 5 transistors to store a single bit of data, either 1 or 0. So in digital electronics versus analog, digital is either on or off, and the on is signified by a 1, and off is signified by a 0. Okay, so I won't go into this type of addressing, or to the power of, it's 2 to the power of 1 every single time, exponentially. But yeah, it's basically, yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, that's for on or off, 1 or 0. And each bit, so the 1 is an on bit and the 0 is an off bit. And then what happens is, so digital on or off simple versus analog is a wave that can vary up, spiking up or going below the baseline. Baseline is at your normal current level. So anyway, pun intended, current level, meaning at the level you're going in, and also the level of the current, which pushes the electrons through a circuit. But anyway, CRAM gets its efficiency from something called magnetic tunnel junctions, or MTJs. The MTJ is a small device that takes the spin of electrons to store data instead of relying on electrical charges, like traditional memory, like I was talking about. This makes it faster, more energy efficient, able to withstand wear and tear better than the conventional memory chips like RAM. CRAM is also adaptable to different AI algorithms. The researcher says it makes it flexible and energy efficient solutions for AI computing. And they conclude by saying the focus will now turn to industry where research teams hope to demonstrate CRAM on a wider scale and work with semiconductor companies to scale the technology. So when we talk about scaling something, we're not talking about the weight of something like a weight scale. We're talking about how much more it can grow. So let's say you have one of something, you want to scale it, you want to grow it to, let's say, 10. Okay, and you scaled it, otherwise known as scaling up. So you're scaling something to a larger degree, or increasing something to a larger degree. And that's what scaling is. That's where the money is made. So ultimately, when it comes down to it, yes, technology is there to solve problems, right? To make people's lives better and more efficient, but ultimately also has a secondary or second purpose, which is, of course, to make money. So don't forget about that. Now, before I read this third article, the final third article of the review, I would like to let you know this is for review, educational, and yes, sorry, it's for review, educational, and informational purposes. It's not to take the credit for the intellectual property of the article. The full credit to the intellectual property of the article goes to the publisher, which in this case is the Natural Interest, and the story by Maya Carlin. Now the headline reads, "The U.S. Navy railgun nightmare has just begun." And here we see a picture of said railgun and the effects in, or let's say visual effects of what happens during that time it shoots off. In this case, I'm going to tell you it's actually a laser. It's not an actual bomb. It's a laser. Railgun U.S. Navy copyright provided by National Interest. So here are some main points to remember from this article in terms of its summary and key points. That is, railgun technology, first conceptualized in World War I, has been pursued by various nations due to its potential for high-velocity non-explosive projectiles. However, technical challenges, particularly related to power and durability, has stymied progress. Yes, it takes a lot of power to push out a laser, especially a powerful laser, and that's the idea. You see such railgun with the effect of it, and caption reads U.S. Navy railguns. While the U.S. has recently shelved its railgun projects, China continued to explore this field, recently testing electromagnetic railgun with artificial intelligence. Despite these efforts, achieving a reliable and effective railgun remains a significant challenge with both nations facing setbacks in their developments. Usually, the way it works, just as a heads up, it isn't. And that's why I say usually, but not always. Is that the person who first does or is working with the technology first has the experience to know whether something's going to work or not. So when they shelve it, probably means it doesn't work. Doesn't mean it can't work in the future. Just means at the time that they tested it, it wasn't working. So that means if you try to copy it, right? Like some countries copy technologies. So what they do is they take the technology and do what's called reverse engineering, which is say, okay, this is a made product. I take it apart. I see how it works for the purpose of copying it. Okay. Now, to a certain extent, that's good, but the problem is you can never. I mean, it sounds good because you learn something, right? And it may even be cheaper because you're copying the technology. And copying is a nice word, but I think you guys know what I'm referring to when I say copying the technology. So anyway, the problem is when you copy something, all the best you can do is just what they have. That is, if you did a perfect job. And if it wasn't perfect, it's actually going to be substandard or not as good as the original. So that's the problem. That's why it's better to actually innovate and invent your own unique thing, because then you're not trying to copy something that the best case scenario, best you could do is just be even to what something else is. Although, of course, unless you're the one who developed it, it's difficult for you to really 100% copy it. You're going to find some imperfections in the copying. So this is the reality of it. Anyway, so in terms of railgun technology, it's a century-old dream facing modern challenges. Since the concept of the railgun was first introduced in World War I, many nations have invested heavily in acquiring this linear motor device, also known as a rail cannon. This weapon used electromagnetic force to launch high-velocity projectiles. Over the years, emerging technologies and other advancements have led to real-world efforts to develop such a powerful platform. However, many of these efforts have failed due to power and durability issues that even the most cutting-edge engineers have been able to circumvent. U.S. appears to be sidelining its railgun efforts completely. The People's Republic of China, or PRC, is no closer to achieving the pursuit of this weapon. However, the plan is to continue to prioritize developing the field further. China's ongoing railgun efforts and Maya Naval Engineering University team in Beijing use artificial intelligence technology in its latest railgun endeavors. According to Chinese state-run media outlets, the People's Liberation Army Navy, that's PLAN, usually you hear it as PLA, which is the People Liberations Army. I take it this is a collaboration or combination of the two. Tested an electromagnetic railgun by firing a smart bomb 15 kilometers at a speed of Mach 5.0. Although the test launch was not deemed successful, it demonstrates Beijing's continued pursuit of railgun technology. It's good to not give up on things, but you also have to understand. You have to also be realistic to the chances of whether you're going to be successful. So, return on investment for time has to be considered as well. Now, U.S. has also invested heavily in acquiring railgun capabilities in the past, even if related efforts have been essentially in the back burner more recently. Over the last decade, analysts estimate the Navy has allocated upwards of $500 million to its electromagnetic railgun or EMRG program. In 2022, however, U.S. Congressional Research Service report noted that the U.S. had ceased funding for its railgun project, but that the Navy still hoped the weapon, excuse me, hoped it could be potentially valuable for the missile defense down the line. Now, how the railgun tech works. Since the overall objective of such a program would be the ability to fire projectiles at hypersonic speeds, they would not even need to contain explosives in order to inflict damage on targets. Nearly 2 decades ago, the Pentagon asked BAE Systems and General Atomics to develop a working railgun that could help steer onboard guns away from gunpowder-based propulsion to electric propulsion. As detailed by Popular Mechanics, unlike traditional railguns that ignite gunpowder or some other powder charge to send the projectile down a tube, railguns don't rely on explosions. This means the railgun could fling a projectile faster and farther without storing dangerous and bulky powder charges, and the guns weren't subjected to the extremely high pressure involved in the powder explosion. Power could be generated by a ship's integrated power system, which is designed to generate, store, and release huge amounts of electricity. Kind of you see a picture of this sort of, it looks like an explosion, but it more looks like it's, what is it, light or something. So it says railgun. Well, in theory, the railgun concept could provide a huge asset to Navy's armament capabilities. Several technical issues have prevented it from coming to fruition. The overarching problem associated with the weapon is power itself. Acquiring enough power to actually launch a projectile into a controlled and reliable manner is simply not a realistic endeavor for a warship. And the article concludes by mentioning about the author, Maya Karlin, defense expert. And it says Maya Karlin, national security writer in the national interest, is an analyst with the Center for Security Policy and former Anna Sobolevi Fellow at IDC, Herzliya in Israel. She has bylines in many publications, including the National Interest, Jerusalem Post, and Times of Israel. And it says you can follow her on Twitter at Maya Karlin. Image credit goes to Creative Commons and or Shutterstock. And that will do it for our third and final article for the review. Before I end the review, I would like to first of all thank you for taking the time to watch this video. As you could be watching any other news review or any other review here on YouTube or Rumble, as I'll be posting on it. At the time of this, you see this, will be posted, of course, on YouTube and Rumble. So I greatly do appreciate that. Now, as this did provide value for you to be informed in the news, what I'd like you to do is please click like on the video. That way, push the algorithm, more people will be able to view it and enjoy it. If you haven't already, please click the subscribe button. That way you'll have access to all the content on this channel, as I do have a variety of content on this channel. Also, if you haven't done already, or done it already, please click the bell button. That way you'll be notified of all my future videos as they do come out. And that way you won't miss any of my new videos as they do come out, and you'll be up to date with my videos. So I'd like to wish you a great day wherever you are in the world. Take care,